it's good to have you back. That was very interesting, and it sort of put things in perspective. Some of the problems we're having in our education sector. So now we have joining us live from Ogun State. We have Dr. Lekon Oyetokun. He is a senior lecturer at Mapoli, and we also have Comrade Azan Akintoye, who is joining us live from Lagos, NUT chairman, Lagos State. Many thanks for being with us on the show at this time. But first, let me start with Dr. Lekon. If you were to point a finger to one thing that you would say is the huge problem in the education sector of Nigeria, what would you point to?
Very much. The major problem of education in Nigeria, as it were, is funding. At every level of education, funding is the main problem. And this is so because if you look at what we have been having, the UNESCO specification for funding education is 26%. And there is no government, whether at the local, state, or federal, that has made that. But we want to even assume that that is not even because of competing needs, that may not be feasible, as it were. But the truth of the matter is that even the budgeted money for education all over, you see that the percentage of actual money released from the budgeted is insignificant, and it can hardly take care of the needs of the various levels of education in Nigeria. And that's why you have the many problems that you are having in Nigeria. You have incessant strikes, lack of infrastructure, and so on and so forth in many, especially at the tertiary level that I operate from. And this is it's affecting the quality of education, as it were.
Apart from lack of adequate funding, as you've mentioned, we always see, as you've rightly said, that a lot of institutions often go on strike. Some people have actually advocated that perhaps these institutions should try to generate money by themselves so that it won't be this sort of over-reliance on the federal government. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you see, in other climes, that is the situation. Institutions are allowed to generate funds. But here in Nigeria, we have politicized education to the level that even when institutions try to charge what is called appropriate fees regime for students, you see government coming in to say, no, you cannot charge this amount, you cannot charge this amount. And let me give you an example. Some higher institutions have just increased their fees. And what do we have across? You have outcry, left, right, and center. So much so that the government has now come to say that, oh, these institutions that have increased fees should find a way of bringing the fees regime down. Now, if you want quality education, I don't think this should be the case, because some of the rates, some of the fees that students pay, and I'm being very pragmatic here, some of the fees paid by students in our tertiary institutions, especially public institutions, are very, very ridiculous. You have a situation where university students are paying 60,000, 50,000 naira in a session as fees. That is ridiculous, because even in some private primaries and nursery schools, they pay up to 200,000. And look at what is the quality of the manpower at those level of education. And now at the higher level, tertiary level, you want students to pay 60,000, and when it is increased to 100,000, students, parents, and everybody begin to cry that, shout that the fees are too much. Look, if we want quality education, students must be ready to pay for it. The era of a government shouldering the responsibility for everything that you have is gone. The resources of government, for now, we have seen, is not enough to take care of what we have in the education sector. The needs of the education, the tertiary education sector. So you need the input of parents and the students themselves to also contribute their own quota. There is no free lunch even in Freetown today. There is no free lunch. So if you want quality education, students, parents, and their guardians must be ready to pay for it. And that is the reality. When people now begin to play politics in respect of funding of education, they begin to shy away from reality. That's why you have all these kind of problems. You see, if you compare what is happening in public institutions with what goes on in the private institutions where they pay appropriate fees, you will discover that you hardly have strikes in the private tertiary institutions. You hardly have strikes. You hardly have all these kind of challenges that people cry about in public institutions, public tertiary institutions. And that is to tell you that the funding that we have in public institutions cannot cope with the needs of what is required in public tertiary institutions. So students and parents and their guardians must be ready to pay. This is no time for everybody, people to be. We have discovered that government is not forthcoming when it comes to funding education. Although they are doing their bit, but their bit is definitely not enough. Many, especially if we look at many state institutions, for example, they are like, some of them are like glorified secondary schools. They lack the kind of facilities that they're supposed to have. And when you go to those institutions, you feel sorry that you are in those institutions. And this is not good. This does not bode well for the quality of kind of education that we need in Nigeria. Everybody must be ready to pay. The era of saying government must shoulder everything is gone. We must face reality, and that is my take on that.
Okay, all right. We thank you so much for your views. Now let's have Comrade Azan Akintoye, NUT Chairman, Lagos State. Now, everyone around the world, all countries across the world, celebrated World Teachers' Day on October 5, and of course, Nigeria was not exempted. If we are to look at how Nigerians have been treating teachers all over the years, do you think that what we have obtainable right now in the teaching profession is justifiable? Because a lot of people do not really embrace the teaching profession. Everyone wants to do almost everything apart from being a teacher. So what do you have to say about that?
It's like the network is poor. I didn't get you right. But if I may probably assume what I had, I think you were trying to make clarification on the reason why people have decided to take up other profession other than teaching. Am I right?
Yes, please go ahead, sir. Yes.
Yeah. It is about the value the society plays on teaching as a profession, and is as a result of so many factors. In those days when we were young and we were in primary school and secondary school in our various villages, teachers within the community, they were the opinion leaders. Even the traditional rulers in the community, they see them as a first point of reference in terms of consultation then. So everyone looks up to his or her teacher then as a model. And that was the time when the society really placed adequate value that the teachers and teaching profession deserve. But over time, everything has eroded. You see, like my senior colleague in the house just affirmed that we have decided to politicize everything, and it is even dangerous to politicize education, because education has to do with the future of any nation. When you have a quality teacher, then you are likely to have a very qualitative citizenry. And when you have a very enlightened citizen, it is even of advantage to the government or leadership of such nation, because you will spend little or no resources on advocacy in terms of your policies and programs. But in this part of the world, we just felt that everything should be politicized, and we remove the value, and we are suffering from it today. And that has led to even the kind of the quality of leadership we are having over the years in the country. It's about value.
Okay, all right. Since we are talking about value now, perhaps we could also say that the federal government themselves too are not placing enough value on the teaching profession, which brings us to the case of subsidy. Well, the federal government all opines that at least we are benefiting a little bit from subsidy in the education sector. But do you feel like more needs to be done in that aspect, since it seems like we are not really getting so much value from education? We have almost every day one student is leaving Nigeria to another country, all in the sake of better education or for greener pasture.
I think this issue of network is really affecting the audio. But if I may get you right, you are trying to reflect on the effect of our inadequate funding of education that recently has led to occupational mobility, whereby not only the medical practitioners, but also teachers in Nigeria, they are moving en masse to seek greener pasture as a result of the inability of leadership of our nation to pay adequate attention to education. That is the kind of scenario we continue to witness, because naturally, as a human being, we are naturally self-centered. It is a kind of natural affinity. You move towards an environment that will probably give room for your survival, and a kind of environment that enable you to achieve your set out goals. So we can't blame people for that. We blame our society that we are being insensitive in terms of our priority. So anytime we decide to move away from that old order, then we'll get the result. But it is highly pathetic. When we could not sustain our own nation, people are moving en masse to actually develop other nations. These are the countries that, in terms of evaluation, they tend to relegate us to the lowest herb. But it's not funny that those same countries that actually rated us low are still, yearning for the services of her, professionals. That is international hypocrisy that we have been talking about. That solution is right here with us. We should stop looking up to these nation we rated so much high as if we can't do without them. Every solution is local. Let's continue to believe in ourselves, believe in our nation, and do everything humanly possible as leaders in this country to place so much premium on our people in order to get the best out of them. Otherwise, this is another era of colonization through backdoor. I pray we survive it.
Yeah, I sincerely hope so too. And now back to Dr. Lekon Oketoko. Earlier, you
Yeah.
mentioned about we paying more for education if we want to see the value of it. But now, current economic realities would not make a lot of families be able to do that, because a family that is earning a particular amount of money, inflation has already taken half of that value of money. And we have some students who, according to them, they are the ones sponsoring themselves to firms through the tertiary institution. So if we are trying to get so much value on education, does it not mean that we will be leaving some people behind because they just cannot afford the new school fees because of current economic realities?
Well, I don't. Thank you very much. Don't get me wrong about people paying for education. I'm not advocating for outrageous school fees regime in our tertiary institution. I've only given you a scenario where at the lower level of education, people pay more than they pay at the tertiary level. And that's an irony because it is at the tertiary level that high level manpower is trained. It is at the tertiary level that professionals are trained. Now, when you now have a situation where even the people, students or parents, do not want to pay to have all that, then it is a big irony. And I think that is due to the fact that our government has also been very hypocritical about education and funding of education. Which brings us to what I talked earlier, what I said earlier about politicization of education. Look, there are some state governments in Nigeria that have 6, 7, 8, 9 tertiary institutions. And if you look at what is happening in those tertiary institutions, you marvel at you just be shocked about what is happening. They are barely surviving. And that is not good enough. Now, if the management of such institutions increase fees, for example, it is that same government that is not funding them that will say, look, you can't do this, you can't do that. Where do they want them to get funds, to pay salaries, to pay for the infrastructural, whatever, the services, and to maintain their level of equipment? So these are some of the issues. So where do you come in as a student? Where you come in is that you must be ready to pay, to contribute your own quota to ensure that you have that kind of quality education that you desire. That's what I'm saying. By the time you start saying that you don't want to pay or you don't want to pay appropriate fees, even with inflation, people are still buying bread at a higher price. With inflation, people are still buying clothes at a higher price. So with education, you must also be ready to pay for education at that higher price, because there is no alternative to education, to knowledge. And if you believe that you have value, you want to have value for knowledge, you must be ready to pay for it. I'm not talking about outrageous fees regime. No, that's not what I'm saying. We have private institutions in Nigeria that are charging fees. And people are going there. They are, you can say they are privileged Nigerians, but no, they are not privileged. They are not privileged. They are just They are just saying that they want the best for their ward. That's why they are paying for those services in those private institutions. And the government institutions must also, students who go to government institutions also must be ready to pay something proportional to what they will get when they go to those tertiary institutions. Not that they will be saying, we don't want increase in fees, we don't want increase in fees. The era of saying you don't want increase in fees is gone. Nothing is static. Everything is dynamic. You can't be paying 10 naira in 10 years ago and still want to pay 10 naira today, simply because you say that some people are indigent, some people will not be able to afford it. It's not right.
All right, we really thank you for your view. And I feel like I need to ask this question. So I'm going to be asking Comrade Azan Akintoye this particular question. The Ninth Assembly, a bill was proposed that all politicians, all leaders, their children should be mandated to school in Nigeria and not abroad. The bill did not see the light of the day. It was turned down immediately. Do you think that if we had that type of scenario, that all of our leaders, politicians, business elite, all of them, their children are schooling in Nigeria, do you feel that perhaps education might get the right attention it needs then?
Our problem in this country is that place law that we enact ourselves upon, right over upon those who actually enacted the law. You see, by the time you get to that level of discussion, people will begin to tell you that they have freedom, certain fundamental human rights that are prevented from solely from wherever they desire. So then you can forget about the morality. You can't give what you don't have. And you see, in most of the cases in these days, you see rules based on technicalities. We leave issues. So we only get judgment, we don't get justice any longer. That is where we find ourselves. There is no doubt that in those days, when things were working, it was working because those who are the instrument of change, they also participate actively in the involvement of that change that they profess. It's not about just talk. They walk the talk. So, but this, people will tell you that under the law, I cannot be compelled to do this, even if it's the best for the system. Whereas, if we can subscribe to the public order in this country, your rights or children, even yourself, are not patronized educational institution other than the one we have within the country. You cannot patronize any medical services outside the country within that period of. If you are a businessman, then you can go anywhere you like. But as a public official, it should be a matter of law that that right you can claim must be submitted to the state. Desirable change. What of it? All that constitute the elite, we are worsening the situation because we want to show the class that we do not belong.
Much, Comrade Azan Akitoye, boy. It seems like your network there is not at its best. So now I have a question I want to direct to Dr. Phyllis Oronda. In the northern part of Nigeria, there's always this impression that they do not really want to pursue education. And last week, we have schools that were raided by bandits, their hostels. They kidnapped a number of students. And this, of course, would discourage a lot of people. This would even be an excuse that if you go to school, then you might be kidnapped. So what steps do you think government can also take in making sure that people who are going to school are better secured?
Well, I think the last administration of Lord Jonathan, before that of Buhari, came about with a school security program or policy. Maybe they need to go back there and see how they can jingle that or rejiggle that. And of course, the security can come about with school protection policy. You know, some schools, you find out some of the schools that we're talking about don't even have perimeter fence. They are not even properly enclosed and all of that, not just in the north. So, because if those schools don't have basic infrastructure that can even make students, and some of these schools are with boarding facilities, and so what happened in the night? How many schools can you police with security agencies? Every secondary school in the north. Is it possible? Do we have the number? Even the Shibok experience, there were security agencies stationed in that particular school, 15 of them, and they were moved out that night when that happened. So, you know, so all of this, I think we have to go back to them and see that, because these bandits are looking for soft targets. And the soft target, one of those soft targets will be schools, religious centers, markets, you know, where they can just walk in and walk out. So it is all in the hands of our government and the security agencies. And like all people approve, we have to deploy all people approach to be able to save and secure ourselves in Nigeria.
Thank you so much. You've mentioned that a lot. All people approach.
Yes.
And I'm sure that everyone at home too gets the message behind that. For us to have a secure Nigeria, you and I, we have a role to play. So many thanks for being with us on the show today.
Thank you.
And many thanks to Comrade Azan Akintoye, the NUT Chairman, Lagos State, and Dr. Lekon Oketo.